In this video, we're gonna take a close look at everything that happens to Belle in the story of Beauty and the Beast. To understand her journey, we first have to look at what her day-to-day life was like in the tiny French town where she grew up. She lived there with her dad, Maurice, who spent all his time coming up with strange inventions. Because he was a bit unusual and Belle was always carrying a book around, the people who lived in the village didn't really know what to make of them. Most of the neighbors thought Belle was a bit odd or funny because she didn't care about the same things they did. While everyone else was busy gossiping or sticking to their daily routines, Belle was always off in her own world, thinking about the stories she read and wishing her life was more exciting. Since she wasn't interested in the typical things a young woman in that town was expected to care about, she ended up feeling like she didn't really fit in with anyone else. This brings us to Gaston, who is a very important part of her life in the village, though not in a good way.
Belle, it's about time you got your head out of those books and paid attention to more important things. Like me.
Gaston was a hunter that everyone in town absolutely loved. He was very full of himself and thought he was the best at everything. He decided that he wanted to marry Belle, but not because he actually liked her personality or cared about what she had to say. To him, she was just a prize to be won because she was considered the prettiest girl in the area. Even though all the other women in town were constantly trying to get his attention, Belle had no interest in him at all. She didn't want to be someone's trophy wife or spend the rest of her life in a boring marriage where she couldn't use her brain.
Say you'll marry me.
I'm very sorry, Gaston, but I just don't deserve you.
Whoa!
She wanted to see the world and have the kind of adventures she read about in her books. She refused to settle for a dull life, which Gaston found impossible to understand. He was so used to getting whatever he wanted that he couldn't handle the fact that Belle was the only person who didn't think he was amazing. Everything changed for Belle one day when her father's horse came back to the house alone, which made her realize right away that something bad had happened to him. She went out into the woods to search for him and eventually found him locked up in a cell inside a dark, scary castle that seemed to be under some kind of spell. The person who lived there was a frightening creature known as the Beast. Belle couldn't stand to see her father suffering, so she did something very brave and unselfish. She told the Beast that she would stay in the castle as his prisoner forever if he would just let her father go home. The Beast agreed to the trade, and that is how Belle's life in the enchanted castle started. Back in the village, her father Maurice was desperate to get help so he could save his daughter. He went to the local tavern to ask people for backup, but it didn't go very well. He tried to explain that Belle was being held by a giant beast, but everyone just laughed at him and told him he was losing his mind. Gaston, who was still upset that Belle had rejected him earlier, saw this as an opportunity. Instead of helping Maurice, Gaston came up with a really mean plan to put Maurice in a mental institution.
So you want me to throw her father into the asylum unless she agrees to marry you? Oh, that is despicable. I love it.
He figured he could use that as leverage to force Belle to marry him. He would tell her he'd let her father out of the asylum only if she agreed to be his wife. Meanwhile, at the castle, Belle's relationship with the Beast didn't start off very well at all. They were both pretty unhappy and didn't get along. However, things slowly started to shift after a few specific moments. One major turning point was when Belle tried to run away and was attacked by a pack of wolves in the forest. The Beast showed up and put his own life on the line to protect her. Even though she had a chance to keep running while he was hurt, she decided to bring him back to the castle and help take care of his injuries instead.
Just hold still.
That hurts!
If you'd hold still, it wouldn't hurt as much.
Well, if you hadn't have run away, this wouldn't have happened.
If you hadn't frightened me, I wouldn't have run away.
Another big moment happened when the Beast gifted her with his huge library. It was the first time someone had actually paid attention to her love for reading, and it showed her that he might actually care about the things she found important. As they spent more time together, they started to realize they had things in common and they began to enjoy each other's company. They had a lot of small moments that helped them get closer, and eventually, the Beast realized he had fallen in love with her. But when Belle looked into a magic mirror and saw that her father was sick and dying alone in the woods, she was heartbroken. Even though the Beast knew that letting her leave might mean he would stay a beast forever, he decided to do something kind. He told her she was no longer a prisoner and that she was free to go help her father, putting her happiness ahead of his own. After Belle left the castle, she made it back home and started looking after her father to help him get better. But just like we talked about earlier, Gaston hadn't given up on his mean plan. He showed up with the owner of the mental asylum, and he was ready to haul Maurice away. Gaston told Belle that the only way to save her father from being locked up was to agree to marry him right then and there. To prove that her father wasn't actually crazy and was telling the truth about the castle, Belle pulled out the magic mirror the beast had given her. She showed the whole village that the beast was real. When she talked about the beast, she was very kind and protective, which made Gaston really angry and jealous.
I know he looks vicious, but he's really kind and gentle. He's my friend.
If I didn't know better, I'd think you had feelings for this monster.
He's no monster, Gaston. You are.
He couldn't stand the idea that Belle had feelings for a literal monster instead of him. He riled up the whole town and convinced them that the beast was a danger, so he led a big group of people to the castle to attack it and kill him. While the villagers were fighting the enchanted objects inside the castle, Gaston found the beast and they had a big fight on the roof. In the end, his plan failed, and he ended up falling and dying. However, during the fight, he had stabbed the beast, who was now lying there in very bad shape. It looked like he was about to die, and at the exact same time, the very last petal was falling off the magic rose that had been tracking the spell. Belle was crying and told him that she loved him right before it was too late.
I love you.
Because she said she loved him, the magic spell was finally broken. The beast transformed back into a regular human man, who was a prince. All the servants who had been turned into clocks, candles, and teapots became human again as well. Once everything was back to normal, Belle and the prince got married. This was a big deal for Belle because she finally got to leave her small boring village behind. She got to have the kind of grand life and exciting adventure that she used to only be able to find in the books she read. She wasn't an outsider anymore, and she found someone who actually appreciated her for who she was. That is basically how Belle's story goes from being a girl who didn't fit in to becoming a princess in a giant castle.